Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of NIMH, Thorn Valley. It might almost be easier to tell what wasn't in it, Nicodemus continued. That truck was as roomy as a small bus, and the old man hasn't wasted a square foot of it. Not that it was cluttered. On the contrary, everything was neatly in place on its shelf or hook or in its cabinet. It took us a while to understand what a treasure we found. The truck contained, as you might expect, a big stock of toys. It also contained the old man's simple living quarters, a cot, a lamp, a work table, a folding chair, a bucket for carrying water, a plate, pots and pans, and so on. There was a tiny refrigerator with food in it, and some stuffed cans, peas, beans, peaches, and things like that. Most of the toys, we thought at first, we had no particular use for. There were toy automobiles, trucks, windmills and merry-go-rounds, airplanes, boats, and a lot of other things. Mostly things that ran on batteries. It was entertaining to look at them, and some of them were even tried out. For a while, the floor had looked a lot like Christmas morning. We got tired of that and explored farther into the truck. Up near the front, we found several large cardboard boxes, and when we opened them, we found that they were full of electric motors of all sizes, replacement engines for broken ones or worn-out toys. There were dozens of them, ranging from very small, no bigger than a spool of thread, up to some heavy ones that we could hardly move. Then next to these we found the real treasure, the old man's tools. They were neatly arranged in shining rows inside a steel cabinet as big as a trunk. There were screwdrivers, saws, hammers, clamps, vices, wrenches, and pliers. There were welding tools, soldering irons, and electric drills. And the beauty of it was, since they were designed for working on toys, they were nearly all miniature, easily small enough for us to handle. Yet they were themselves not toys. They were made of the finest tempered steel, like the tools of a watchmaker or a dentist. Here is Arthur, who said at first, "Do you realize what we've got here? We could open our own machine shop. With these tools and all these motors, we could make anything we wanted." "We sure could," said Jenner, "except you've forgotten one thing." "And what's that?" "We have no electricity. The old man couldn't have run these things off of just batteries. Small toy motors, yes, but not the real ones, not the power tools. He had to plug it into a house current to get those. See, here's extension cord on the wall. There is a long coil of heavy black cable hanging from a hook on the wall. It would plug into one end of a socket." Now another rat spoke up, a rat named Sullivan. He was a great friend of Arthur's, and like him, had a particular interest in engines and electricity. "Maybe," he said, "we could plug it into a house current too." "How?" I said. "And who's going to let us?" "Do you remember that cave we looked at the other day? The one we decided was too close to the farmhouse?" That was the beginning of it. The end you have seen yourself. He was speaking of a cave you saw today. We all trooped back to it and examined it more carefully. It was too close, or at least closer than we had planned to live to a human habitation. But then we saw the huge rose bush near the tractor shed, where there was quite a lot of digging, and we put a concealed entrance. But most importantly, we noticed that there was an electric light in the tractor shed. Mr. Fitzgibbon had an underground power cable leading out from his house to the shed. We dug a tunnel to it, tapped it, and had all the electricity we needed. Near it ran a water pipe. We tapped that too, so we had running water. Then a few at a time we moved the tools and the motors from the toy tinker's truck to the cave. We got nearly all of them before the truck disappeared. We went back one day, and it was gone. Only just a hole remained where the tire had been sunk in. Forest rangers must have found it and hauled it away, but they never discovered or disturbed the mound where the old man was buried. So we built ourselves the lives you see around you. Our colony thrived and grew to 115 rats. We taught our children to read and write, and we had plenty to eat, running water, electricity, a fan to draw in fresh air, an elevator, and a refrigerator. Deep underground, our home stayed warm in the winter and cool in the summer. It was a comfortable, almost luxurious existence, and yet all was not well. After the first burst of energy, the moving of the machines and the digging in the tunnels and the rooms, after that was done, a feeling of discontent settled upon us like a creeping disease. We were reluctant to admit it at first. We tried to ignore the feeling or to fight it off by building more things. Bigger room, fancier furniture, carpeted hallways, things we were not really in need of. I was reminded of a story that I had read at the Boniface estate when I was looking for things written about the rats. It was about a woman in a small town who bought a vacuum cleaner. Her name was Mrs. Jones, and up until then, she, all like her neighbors, had kept her house spotlessly clean by using a broom and a mop. But the vacuum cleaner did it faster and better, and soon Mrs. Jones was the envy of all the other housewives in the town, so they also bought vacuum cleaners too. The vacuum cleaner business was so brisk, in fact, that the company had made them open a branch factory in the town. The factory used a lot of electricity, of course, and so did the women with the vacuum cleaners, so the local electric company had to put up a new plant to keep them all running. In its furnaces, the power plant burned coal, and out of its chimney black smoke poured day and night, blanketing the town with soot, making all the floors even dirtier. Still, by working twice as hard and twice as long, the women of the town were able to keep their floors almost as clean as they had before Mrs. Jones ever bought a vacuum cleaner in the first place. The story was part of a book of an essay, and the reason I had read it so eagerly was that it was called The Rat Race, which I learned means a race where no matter how fast you run, you don't get anywhere. But there was nothing in the book about rats, and I felt bad about the title because I thought it wasn't about a rat race at all. It was a people race, and so sensible rats would never do such a foolish thing. And yet here we were, rats getting caught up in something a lot like a people race, for no good reason. And the worst thing was that even with our make work projects, we didn't really have enough to do. Our lives were busy. I thought of the scientists that had written about our prairie dog ancestors, and I was worried. So were many others. We called a meeting, indeed, a whole series of meetings extending over more than a year. We talked and we argued and considered, and we remembered our evenings in the library at the Boniface estate when we wondered what a rat civilization would actually be like. Oddly enough, Jenner, my old best friend, took little part in these discussions. He remained rather glum and silent and seemed disinterested. But most of the others felt as I did, and slowly something became clear. We saw our problems and we figured them out as well as we could and what to do about them. First, we realized that finding the toy tinker's truck, which had seemed like such an enormous stroke of luck, had in fact led us into a very deep trap we should have avoided. As a result, we were now stealing more than ever, not only food but electricity and water. Even the air we breathed was drawn in by a stolen fan, run by a stolen current. It was this, of course, that made our life so easy that it seemed pointless. We did not have enough work to do because a thief's life is always based on somebody else's work. Second, there was always fear in the back of our minds that we got caught up in. Or perhaps not caught, we took precautions against that, so as much to find out. Mr. Fitzgibbon was surely aware that some of his crops were being removed, and as our group grew larger, we would have to take more and more. Already we had begun lining some of the grain bins with sheet metal. That didn't bother us particularly because we knew how to get the door open, but suppose he should take to locking them. We would have to cut through the locks, of course, or even through the sheet metal walls. We would have a tool for that. But it would be a dead giveaway. What would Mr. Fitzgibbon think about rats who would cut through metal? All these things we worried about and talked about and puzzled over, but we could not find an easy answer, because there wasn't one. There was, however, a hard answer. I began taking long walks into the forest, and I had an idea in the back of my head. Sometimes I went alone, and sometimes with others. On one particular day I went with Jenner. I had not yet told him my idea, nor did I on the morning we set out, but merely proposed a direction. We took along enough food for lunch. I remember that it was autumn, a bright, cool day. The leaves made a rustling sound when the wind blew, and some were turning yellow. In my walk, I had explored the deep trails, trying to find out where they went and where they didn't go, trying to find the wildest parts of the forest, places where not even the rangers even went. A few times I tried asking for information. I asked 2 squirrels, for instance, if they knew what lay on the other side of the mountain that rose before me. But they were silly, fearful creatures, and after looking at me in surprise, they both scurried up the oak tree and scolded senseless sounds, shaking their tails until I left. I asked some chipmunks, and they were more polite. They didn't answer my question, never having been farther than 100 yards from where they were born, but advised me to ask the birds, more specifically one bird, a very old wise owl who was famous throughout the forest. They even told me how to find this enormous tree in which he lived. That was the beginning of my acquaintance with the old owl. He knew every tree, every trail, every stone in the forest. He was, as you know, not naturally friendly towards rats or mice, But when I told him about our life in NIMH and our escape, he grew very interested. Though he did not say so, I think he had already been watching some of our activities from the air in the evenings. Anyway, he was curious and listened carefully when I told him about our problems and my ideas for solving them. I have talked to him many times. It was he who told me about Thorn Valley. The valley lies deep in the forest beyond the big tree. The jeep trails do not cross it, nor even go close to it, for the mountains around it are forbidding, too steep and rocky even for the jeeps, and are covered with thorny thickets. The owl told me that in all the years he had been flying he had never seen a human being near it. Yet the bottom of the valley is level and broad and nearly a mile long. It steep clipped it walls all around it. There are 3 ponds or small lakes in it, and apparently they are fed by springs, for they never dry up. On clear days, the owl said he sometimes saw a small fish swimming in the ponds, and I thought, could rats weave fish nets or make a fishing hook? It was this valley that I was looking for the day I set out with Jenner. I had careful directions from the owl, and yet it took us half a day, moving briskly, to reach the base of the mountain. Then up very steep for almost an hour. Not really difficult for us, since rats are better climbers than men. Also, we are shorter, so we had less trouble with the spiny underbrush. From the top of the high ridge, as we looked down, the valley lay before us. It was beautiful and still, a wild and lonely place. Through the green and the yellow tree tops below us, I could see the water of one of the ponds sparkling in the sun. I got the idea that our eyes, were the first ever to see it. Yet that was not actually true, for we descended into the valley. A deer suddenly appeared in the trees ahead and went bounding off down the slope. There were wild animals there, and I wondered if they even suspected that outside these walls of mountains there were cities, roads, and people. Most of the valley floor was in forest, great spreading oak and maple trees, but near one of the ponds I saw that I had hoped to find, a large natural clearing, a glade where only a coarse grass and wild flowers grew, and some clumps of black raspberry bush. This clearing was far out at the side of the valley. Beyond it, mountains rose again, a steep slope with big outcroppings of stone, granite ledges that thrust 6 or 7 feet out of the earth. We could live here, I said to Jenner. I suppose we could, he said. It's a beautiful place, but it's a long way from the barn. Think how far you'd have to carry food, and no electricity. We could grow our own food, I said, and I started to add, but didn't, and maybe someday make our own electricity, if we decided we wanted to. We don't know how. Anyways, where would we grow it? Right here. It would be easy to clear away these weeds and these bushes, and if we dug into the mountainside under these rock ledges, we'd have all the cave spaces we wanted, dry and warm, with a good roof. There could be enough room for 1,000 of us. There aren't 1,000 of us. Well, there might be someday. But why? Why move? We've got a better place to live right now. We've got all the food we wanted. We've got electricity and lights, running water. I can't understand why everybody talks about changing things. Because everything we have is stolen. That's silly. Is it stealing when a farmer takes milk from the cow or eggs from a chicken? They're just smarter than the cows and the chicken, and that's all. Well, people are cows. If we're smart enough, why shouldn't we just get food from them? It's not the same. Farmers feed the cows and the chickens they take care of. We don't do anything for them. Besides, if we keep it up, we're sure to be found. And what then? What if we are? People have been exterminating rats for centuries, but they haven't succeeded. We're smarter than them anyways. What are we going to do? Dynamite us? Let them try. We'll find out where they keep the dynamite and we'll use it on them instead. Then we'd really be found out. Don't you see, Jenner? If we ever did anything like that, they'd figure out who we are and what we know. Then only 2 things could happen. Either they'd hunt us all down and kill us, or they'd capture us and put us in a sideshow. Or maybe they'd take us back to NIMH. And this time, we'd definitely never get away. I don't believe any of that, Jenner said. You've got this idea stuck in your head. We've got to start from nothing and work hard and build a rat civilization. I say, why start from nothing if you can start with everything? We've already got a civilization. No, we haven't. We're just living on the edge of somebody else's, like fleas on a dog's back. If the dog drowns, so did the fleas. That was the beginning of an argument that never had a satisfactory ending. Jenner would not yield to my point of view, nor I to his. It wasn't that he was lazy and didn't want to work. He was just more cynical than the rest of us. Stealing did not bother him, and he was a pessimist. He never believed that we could really make it on our own. Maybe he's right, but I and most of the others felt that we have to try at least. If we fail, well, then I suppose we come back here, or we find some other farm, or eventually all we learned and we go back to stealing garbage. So we began working out the plan. It has been a long time coming. 3 years ago this spring we started watching Mr. Fitzgibbon to learn what he did and how he did it. To bring food out of the earth, we collected books and magazines on farming, and we discovered early that in order to stop stealing, we would, for a while, have to steal more and more. We laid up 2 years of food supply so that even if we don't succeed in growing a good crop the first year, we would not go hungry. We've got 2/3 of it moved to Thorn Valley already. We've dug a dry cave to store it in, under one of those big rocks. We got seeds and we got our plows. We've cleared and cultivated part of the land near the pond, and in a few days we'll begin our first planting. We've even dug some irrigation ditches in case there's a drought. We have a schedule worked out, some of our countdown, and by early June we will be out of this cave and out of Mr. Fitzgibbon's barn forever, I hope.